This is Lesson 4, Density Matters from the Investigating Chemistry Kit. Today, students are going to explore different things and why they sink and why they float. They're going to start with a design challenge where they're going to create 2 boats. The purpose is to create one that will float with 3 washers in it, and to create another one with 3 washers that will sink. Seeing that using the same materials, they can create different outcomes. You may want to experiment with this a little bit on your own ahead of time so that you have some ideas in mind of what is effective for floating. That way, if students are experimenting and a little frustrated that it's not working, you kind of have some ideas of how you can guide them in that exploration process. Certainly, we want them to spend some time on trial and error, but we don't want the frustration levels to get so high that they're not able to effectively move forward in the lesson. So a little playing ahead of time for you will certainly help make that more effective and a better learning experience for everybody. The first thing that you'll do is, after students have had a chance to test their own boats, you're going to ask the students to give you 2 examples, one that floated and one boat that sank. And then you're going to do a demonstration for the whole class using those. You want to fill your containers with water ahead of time, and you'll want to make sure that they are as full to the top as they can be, so you'll probably want to add just a little bit more water from a cup. With the size of these boats, they don't necessarily displace a lot of water, so to get it to go over the lip and into the container below means it's got to be really full ahead of time. So you're going to take an example of a boat that floats and place it on there. And you'll see that it did displace some of the water. Then you're going to take an example of a boat that sank, whatever that looks like from your students. And that displaced some of the water as well. The next thing that you'll do is very carefully take your 2 containers out so that you can compare the amount of liquid that was left in each of the 2 containers. And then this is where you'll really discuss the idea of displacement and that that's what causes the boats to float. Once they have this additional knowledge and the additional vocabulary, they can go back and use that in looking at their own designs that they worked on with their groups and talking about what made it float and what made it sink in their design. If they had a hard time creating one that floated, they might use some of this new knowledge to see about creating an even better design that would float, if that was a difficult challenge for their group. This is the end of the first part of this lesson. There's a second part of this lesson that they'll work on next in their workbooks. This is the second part of the 4th lesson for the Investigating Chemistry. You can do this in 2 parts over separate days if you'd like, or you can do everything as part of the same lesson, whatever works for your time and your space. Again, students are going to be working on discovering why things float and why things sink. This is a lot more hands-on, where they will get to test things themselves in the water, thinking about what they had learned in the first part of this lesson. All of the instructions for this are in the workbook. So it's a good chance for them to practice that skill of reading directions and being able to follow them. They will also record their observations in the workbook as well as they are doing their testing. So the first thing that they're going to do is take several cups, and they're going to fill them with differing numbers of washers. And then they are going to test how those sink and how they float. At the end of this, they will measure them and find the mass of all of these and compare the different masses in what sank and what floated. The first thing that students will need to do is they're going to need to fill one of these cups with water. They want to get it completely filled with water with as little air in there as possible. It does describe how to do that. Again, this may be one you want to practice ahead of time so that you can help them. But the best way to do it is to completely submerge it Make sure any air bubbles are coming out, and then actually place the lid on while it is still in the water to get as little air in that cup as possible. This way, the cup is completely filled with the water. The next thing students will do, working on their own, is they are going to come through and measure, they're going to come through and observe whether the different cups sink or float. They can, depending on the containers you have, fit several in at a time. And they'll need to record each one individually in their workbooks as far as what sinks, what floats. And they'll notice that even with the cups that are floating, depending on how many washers are in, some will start to sink more even though they still are floating. After students have had a chance to work through this and make their observations, then they will go through and measure the mass of each of these and record that as well, so that they can talk about how the difference in mass impacted the different results as far as if it will sink or if it will float. Next, you can use a lot of different materials for students to explore what sinks and what floats. This is a great opportunity to use everyday items like different fruits and vegetables. Another great idea is to take two different cans of soda, one that is regular soda and one that is diet soda, and look at the difference there. And you can at that point have students form hypotheses about why one would float and one wouldn't, and then talk about how, while the volume is the same on both of them, the density can be impacted by the ingredients inside, by sugar being used instead of an artificial sweetener. This can also be set up in a science corner for students to continue to experiment with different items as they are working on other things throughout the day or throughout the week until your next science unit. They may bring in things from home that surprised them when they sank or floated. Another really good opportunity to show them how design matters is to take an orange and test the differences between the floating and sinking when the peel is on or peeled off of the orange. Just a really great opportunity for students to continue to apply what they learned during this unit in some great hands-on exploration on their own. Thanks.